let's talk through that more. Are you rolling? Because when I think through what you just described, Warren Buffett, saying it to people, but there's something about having an advisor in your life who drives discipline to bring you back to center. There are a couple terms that I hear all the time right now. One of them is noise, you described that, and then frequency. People who have the ability to zero in on frequency versus the noise tend to have some composure in life and just more discipline. Mm-hmm. What do you see that way? When you describe noise, what are the outcomes of those whose behaviors focus on the noise?
Yeah, I think those that are focusing on the noise, the problem is the media is set up to grab our attention. And so what grabs our attention is negative. And so the media leads 10-1 with negative stories versus one positive. So noise, if you're at all, watching the news, listening to the radio, all you're going to hear is just constant negative.
Yeah.
And because they're not trying to educate you, they're trying to sell advertising, right? And so what people have to do is learn to tune that out and look at the long run of having a plan and sticking to that plan. And can they do that themselves? A few, but what you said earlier, most people need somebody in their life, a coach, brings them back to center and says, no, you really don't want to react to that latest story you heard last night on CNBC. Right? So let's bring you back to center. So, yeah.
There's something about in our conversations, which is why I wanted to do this, which is why, I love your partnership, Cornerstone and Brainstoke, because when I think back on the last 25 years of my life, there's really three key relationships, three, I'm going to call it fluid conversations that have gone on for years. And they're really, three categories of, I'm just going to call them individuals or professionals that have made all the difference. So I often get asked by younger people, business owners, entrepreneurs, investors, whatever you want to kind of categorize them as, people will ask me, how did you do it? What was your idea in business? Or they're really asking, what was the secret to your success? And I often will correct people and say, it wasn't how, it was who. It was really people. It was me connecting with people and having conversations. And they really fall into three categories in terms of just conversations that have made all the difference. None of which have been the media.
Yeah.
I've never had a conversation with newspaper or dialogued with a news anchor or anybody who is in media. You're right. They really have a motive, and the motive is follow us. We want your clicks. We want your views. Mm-hmm. We want your impressions. But the opposite is actually true in terms of success in who. And so those three categories have been, do I have a health professional in my life who gives me real feedback, accountability, calls me out, Tom, you need to figure out your blood pressure. You being an entrepreneur, stress, not pretty good to you. So a health professional, and then a financial professional like you, and then spouse. Just how important it is to have that, kind of three categories of conversations that always go on, and those have made all the difference. And so when it comes to financial capability in my life, having not just an individual, but almost a team of people who are in the industry or people who are, successful financially, and they become a board of advisors to me, almost a group of mentors, without naming names. I was on the bike recently with a gentleman, a friend of mine, who has become a mentor. He's not a financial advisor, but he just has great money habits and mindset. And so talking with him and listening to him, it's just invaluable, and it's always been that way for me. So part of having this segment today with you was, let's have a conversation that's meaningful, that is opposite of what most people become informed in their awareness about money, discipline, financial concepts, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's in the news today, you should have invested in it 6 months ago.
That's right.
Right? Or a year ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So NVIDIA, people are all over like, well, NVIDIA, my stock. It's like, you probably should have invested in it quite a while ago.
Yeah.
The trends, right?
Yeah.
They're on the front cover now. So talk a little bit more with me just about the meaningful conversations, not that you just have with people, but that you have had in your own life. You know, who were the people and who made the difference in terms of your who's of how you arrived where you're at today?
Yeah.
Because you can be a really successful financial advisor and you can say all the right things, but you can be in debt up to your eyeballs. You and I both know.
Right. Oh, yeah.
You can be really good at selling this stuff and do none of it yourself.
Yeah. I mean, and you see that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that having those, who in your life, what mentors have made a real difference. And, I would agree with you 100%, right? Having somebody on the health side and making sure you're taking care of your health. I think if your spouse can be the number one influence in your life. And then having maybe a financial advisor that's not going to tell you what you want to hear or not tell you the latest trends, but have the hard conversations with you on, here's some things that you really need to do to set yourself up. I look at my dad, who certainly would have been one of those on the financial side. And I remember him saying to me early on, I think it was right after I got married, when he said, hey, Gardner, if you and Lisa can live the next 10 years like nobody's willing, you'll be able to live the rest of your life like nobody's able. And that really stuck to me about learning those early discipline, saving, controlling your wants, and if you can do that those first 10 years, then the rest of your life you're going to be able to live like most people can't, and that's proven to be true for sure.
Yeah. When you think of that in concept, is that really saying self-discipline? Mm-hmm. Is that really saying, I really want the Porsche or the Range Rover, but I'm going to drive the Jeep? Yeah. I mean, in practice, what does that really mean?
Yeah, it is. It's in practice. It's two things. I think it's one, building the pyramid the right way. So building a base, a foundation, and that's risk management. We don't live in a perfect world, so the best plan out there, it can get blown to pieces if you have an early death or if you have an accident or an illness. So put a foundation in place first. People today want to flip the pyramid upside down, and they just want all in on NVIDIA, right? Like your point. And so having that first 10 years, I view as build a foundation, build that base first. And then I tell people no rate of return is going to overcome a savings problem. And I'll say it again. It's like you got to get that through your head. I'm telling you, finding the right stock is not going to overcome that you're not saving money. It's not going to make up for it. And you might be able to point to the one guy that got in early with Microsoft or NVIDIA, but that's one in 500,000, right?
Yeah.
The rest of us have to understand that we've got to save, and yes, we need good rates of return, but yeah. Again, rate of return is not going to save a saving problem.
No, and this is key because you talked about this when you're on the podcast, but I wanted to double click on it and dive more into this because I'm literally living this right now. Yeah, I mean, I like to swing for the fences, right? and I've struck out a lot. I hope our listeners know I've struck out a lot.
All he needs one, Tom. All he needs one, and you've had more than one. So, yeah.
What's interesting though is, and I want to be transparent about this, which I don't think a lot of people do. They don't share really the practices that go on. But when you talk about the pyramid, right? So I did build my pyramid with a foundation and a base. And what's interesting is that the company that I started that I'm involved in right now, heavily Labo, like there's a point when you build a company when one of two things occurs after time. And I think that a lot of founders get to this point where they're really looking for the moment. And the moment is momentum. And the momentum starts to build and it starts to grow. And then you have this other thing that happens, which is called a clear line of sight, where you start to recognize, wow, this has legs. And now the financials are starting to show clarity that this could be a home run, you know, in terms of, or it could be a lot of doubles. You don't know. But for me at Lavo right now, in a real-time practice, Lavo's business is growing and it's being successful. But if I, as the founder, with the capital to be in it, if I didn't have patience, if I didn't have patient capital that could stay and let the business catch up to itself, then we would have already exited and closed it.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was enough challenge in the beginning years where this is a business that it needs evolution, it needs time, it needs, you know, the ability to kind of get seasoned and to grow into itself. Not because, I mean, Lavo's in the mental health space. Of all of the home runs that you could hit right now, wouldn't you think, well, the world is on fire with mental health. Like, just send the trucks and it'll be easy. It's not freaking easy. It's really hard. But the thing that's allowed it to now become clear that it can be successful is because I had a foundation. I can literally build a company. We're almost the 4th year in, and I've taken 0 pay. And you know, I don't say that to brag. I just say most people, most founders who are running on a shoestring, if I didn't have savings from my other home runs, I would never be in the position that I am today. And I wanted to come and talk about that, you know, just openly with you, that when advisors say build a foundation, most people are like, well, that sounds really good in practice, but I'm going to put it all into my company. Well, if you don't have it, or you sink it all into the company and you don't keep some safety net, then what may be a very viable business may never have the ability to grow into itself because you don't have, you know, the capital. So, I mean, I'm just one of many people, but do you hear founder stories or startup companies where it's like, yeah, we had to close it, we just ran out of capital?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's such a critical point for a business. But then you could take that down to a personal level, right? Like, what decisions and bad decisions do you make if your back's against the wall, right? If you had to turn a profit early with Lavo, what decisions would you have made early on that could have been long-term detrimental decisions, right? I mean, maybe you'd immediately gone in and cut costs and cut some of your key people because you're like, we just can't pay
decisions.
them. And so people do that on a personal level where they don't have that foundation. And I'm all for swinging for the fences. I think that makes a ton is fine as long as you have that foundation. And if you have the foundation, then you can make good calculating decisions and you can be patient and give it time to work out. And we see so many people that are just on the edge, right? They're one paycheck away from disaster. And they just keep making bad decisions after bad decisions. And when I mean bad decisions, they just are chasing the latest, greatest home run. And because they view that as that's my only way that I'm going to be saved, right? And so they just keep making these bad decisions. And so we try to climb in and say, slow down, build a base. And, you know, and for those of, you know, anybody listening to this, if you haven't read Richest Man in Babylon, you need to read that, right?
100%.
And you know, because the whole concept is save 10% of your income religiously and take 10% of that 10% and swing for the home runs, right? That's the concept. It's not take 10%, you know, live on 100% than take another 10% swing for the fence, right? Which is what people do. Anyway.
What's interesting, for our listeners, this was not teed up. But of all of the books in my early 20s, Liza, I'm sure that Steve Barlow gave it to Liza, Grandpa Barlow, but I still have the key scrolls of The Richest Man in Babylon as the principles that got people, investors. What's your investment thesis? It's The Richest Man in Babylon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really the scrolls, that they became my foundation for how I am going to try to live, the 10% rule.
Yeah.
And I believe in tithing, but I also believe in 10%, pay yourself. Well, today, it is that 10%. It is these multiple, buckets of dollars and assets that allowed me to go from foundation of saving, stay disciplined, this is saving, this is investing, this is retirement, this is cash value life insurance, and then there's the home run money. And to be frank, I still believe that I would much rather be an investor in startup than I would in the market, but they all have their place. So is that common that you see, successful people in building wealth over time, that they do have multiple assets in different places?
Yeah.
That they all have a place?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, you see that common thread where there's always the success story that, the guy had nothing and he swung for the fence and he hit it, and then everybody points to that person as, see, look, you can drop out of Harvard and you create Microsoft, right? So they all use that example, but you're right. Those, I think they're that common thread, Tom, of those that recognize that there is, compartmentalizing your dollars and only putting at risk your risk dollars. And so when people ask you, how have you been able to do what you do? And they want this really fancy, sexy answer, right? Yeah. And you're just like, it's discipline. It's creating that foundation, compartmenting my dollars, only risking a certain amount of dollars. Your difference with you, and you're a little different than we have entrepreneur clients, but when you say, hey, I'm swinging for the fences, it's you, right? And so you're saying, if I'm going to put my money with somebody, I'm going to put it with me and bet on me, and you've demonstrated that you've been able to win. A lot of other people, when they swing for the fences, they're giving their money to somebody else and betting on them, which is worse, right? Like, which is terrible, right? Because we have hundreds of those stories, right?
Yeah.
It's like, don't bet on his dreams, right? I mean, so that's why the market has a place. And you say, look, what we're doing with money in the market is we're investing in 3,000 of the best planets on the planet, and we're diversifying. We're not betting on your uncle's brother. That his idea is going to be a success. And if you want to take a little bit of high risk and give it to him, great. But don't sell the farm to give him that money. So,
I think that there is, and I love what you just described. But this is part of the conversation that I wanted to have with you, and that is that if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you need to only invest in you or whatever your business is versus having other advisors. Right? Early on in my career, I would hear people say, I don't need an advisor. I'm my money guy. I'm going to invest in my business and I'm going to keep it in the business. And I've just found that over the years that isn't necessarily the most prudent plan, just because there are other assets. When I was 21, I didn't have money discipline. I wasn't really taught to budget or to invest or frankly even save money when I was growing up. It was not, we didn't have money conversations, in our household. And so when I started in finance and started just growing, what I recognized was that when I made money, I liked nice stuff. I wanted cool stuff. I was a gearhead, I want new skis, I want whatever. Well, the first thing that taught me discipline was cash value life insurance. the least sexiest investment on the planet. I put $100 in it, it goes backwards $50. Like, what? I don't even need to lose it in the market. Why did I go backwards? Well, the cost of insurance and all this stuff, right? But early on in my 20s, what I realized was that if you don't pay into it, you have to pay your premium. You got to pay your premium, or they cancel it. It's insurance. And so forced saving became this way of like, wow, I just have to pay it because that's gonna. It taught me discipline to first become a saver. Well, what happened over time was that cash value life insurance built value. There was equity there. I just forgot about it, and we kept paying it, and it grew and grew and grew. Well, today, even though I'm investing in other things, that stodgy old cash value life insurance, it's become this incredible portable asset. You can pull money out. It's not just kids' education. It's not just if you die. I've used the money to invest in other things and put it back. How do people create discipline? I mean, at the end of the day, how do you drive those habits and behaviors, into just clients' lives? I mean, if you see them and they make good money, but they're out of control.
Yeah.
How do you coach them, mentor them into behavior?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're bringing up the value of cash value life insurance, of permanent life insurance, and talking about that as becoming as a part of your foundation, a cornerstone of your overall plan. You hit it right on the head. And what it was forced savings. And so putting that in place, that forced savings, is so critical for the long term. And cash value life insurance, when we talk to clients, it's not a sexy product. It's not an alternative. It's not a private equity. And so people don't want to talk about it. I do remind people, I say, when you look at the Fortune 1000 companies, they all have plans for their top executives. And 80% of those plans for their executives is funded by cash value life insurance.
Yeah.
And you would know this because it was a world you were in, right? You were involved in the bank side, but the COLI side, the corporate-owned life insurance. So, but the reason cash value life insurance it can be so successful as part of the plan and that discipline is it creates that forced savings, and it's money that is guaranteed to grow every year. It can't go backwards. And so if you have a piece like that and like you did in your life, you say, hey, I can now take chances elsewhere because I have this as a backstop.
Yeah.
If you don't have that as a backstop, now you're not, when you're taking chances, it's gambling, right? It's not calculated risk, it's just gambling. but when you have that, so yeah, I mean, I think that we keep saying it over and over again, but it's creating that discipline is just creating forced savings, determining how much you're going to save, and then putting plans in place where that gets funded every month, no matter what. And it's boring, it's slow, but that's how you get there.
Yeah, but what's interesting about that is wise financial stewards of success, they tend to have advisors in their life who are going to do what you just described. They're going to have a conversation with someone who is going to tell them, it's prudent. Right? You need some boring advisors in your life, just to keep you, back to center. Well, what's interesting is in chasing some of these home runs and startup companies and stuff that I've been involved in, today I can still sleep at night knowing that we're building these things because I still have those old policies.
Still going, still funding them, yeah.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that the ones that I started, every child of mine that was born, we opened a new policy and we've been at some point, they will all get married and we will gift them those policies and they can keep the money going. And I love that because if they're punks, we don't have to give it to them.
Right.
And if we love them, we will, right? Yeah. Love is conditional. Right?
On financial, on prudence, right?
Oh, if dad needs it for a startup, you're not getting a wedding gift, right?
That's right.
Oh, but we joke about it, but in reality, we would have never known, as a new, having a newborn, that these plans that go in place and those forced savings, they became the discipline for now the decisions that are in front of us today, which is we can afford to help with these other things.
Yeah.
You know, and it's cool, you know, that the right types of conversations with people like you drove the discipline into our lives that 27 years later is serving us.
Yeah.
You know, that's really
I mean, I think you ask about, you know, what's the value of having a financial advisor in your life? I mean, you think you understand it, your world, you understand finances. And I always tell people, I'll say, let's take Tom Brady. I said, you don't think Tom Brady knows how to eat right? You don't think Tom Brady knows how to work out and exercise right? So why does he pay, you know, somebody full-time cook to make sure he's eating exactly right? Why does he pay somebody, you know, a good chunk of money to be a personal financial trainer? We all need that in our lives. You know, Patrick Mahomes, he makes $40 million a year, but he has a personal trainer. You don't think he knows how to do sprints and extra, right? And so you have to have somebody in your life, you know, in your world, having somebody working through mental health problems, right? Just having somebody to dialogue and bounce things off is invaluable. And you're like, well, I'll just do this my own. I'll just read a couple of books and jump on the internet and ask AI, and I can just do this myself. And it's just proven that, but human nature is we have to have somebody that can hold us accountable to things, to keep us from making mistakes and becoming our worst enemy. I always say that I spend most of my time doing behavioral counseling, behavioral modification, right? Just keeping us from making, you know, blowing ourselves up. So, yeah.
I want to read this based on what you just described, because it's awesome what you just said, but we live in worlds our conversations create. So I want to talk about that a little bit more with you. And then, and this is the key one that happened in my 20s, and it's continued to happen with advisors the last 25 years. One great conversation can shift the direction of change forever. And so you just described that, right? And I mentioned this. If you have advisors in health, if you have advisors in finance, and one in your marriage, your spouse, that key relationship, conversations make all the difference.
Yeah.
And I love what you described about professional athletes. You know, they're having conversations that are going to hold them accountable. Mm-hmm. They invest in relationships that are going to hold them accountable to really where they want to go. That discipline becomes, you know, the result of, you know, the conversation.
Your conversations. Yeah. Yeah, that's so, I mean,
Who are you having conversations with now at this age of life? That are going to help you go to your next level? I'm curious.
You know, it's interesting. So,
I know you're talking to the S-Works a lot.
I'm having conversations on a regular basis with my bike, carbon fiber. That's right. Yeah, I mean, my father, who would clearly be my number one financial mentor, passed away in 2020. And so I don't have that ability to call him. I called him every day on my way home from work and had those conversations. But there are some other mentors in my life. Roger McQueen, who was part of Northwestern Mutual, who I'm affiliated with, was a big part of my life for about 15 years. He's now in his early 80s. And he's one that I turn to, that I still go to, that I need help and advice for. And
that's cool.
So yeah, I'm
great guy.
I am not. I do not have all the answers. I find myself making mistakes on my own finances because I get emotional about it, right? And I let emotion start dictating decisions that I'm making, and a lot of times they're the wrong decisions. And so I have to have advisors in my life. Sean Westover's, I go to Sean on a regular basis and say, hey, help me with some of the decisions that I'm going through so that I don't make mistakes. So even though I've been doing this 32 years, I need advisors in my life to help me
Yeah. You have a lot of successful clients. You have people who are very, very wealthy who trust you, for help, but they also have built wealth in their own private lives and businesses. Do you ask people, other successful people who you admire, how they make their own decisions or what they think about, financially?
For sure. Yeah. No, I turn to those guys on a regular basis, right? And kind of glean as much wisdom from them as I can. And because everybody's got a different view, a different take. And so, if anybody that's listening to this, I would for sure. And that's, you think about the many positive attributes that you have, Tom. You're a sponge for taking taking
when you're
information.
slow,
Well,
when you're the slow guy, all you can do is steal ideas from other people. So,
but your whole, what you said earlier, it's not what or how, or it's who, and you have an incredible ability to glean the best from others and then implement that into your life. And what an incredible skill to have that curiosity. And so I would encourage anybody that's listening, find those in your life that is like, hey, they look like they've kind of put it together, at least in this one area, and then ask them. Right?
Yeah. I love that you said that, and this is, that's what you have become for me, is a mentor. And I speak at Weber State often. They've asked me to speak about this thing that I created called a mentor tree, that I really am just a byproduct of 20 or 30 amazing men and women who I just was curious how they did and became who they are and wanted to know. And that collection, someday my kids are going to read all of my journals and be like, what is this? But it was my being the slow kid. Just, if I can't figure it out on my own, I need to ask lots of successful people. And it's just become a compilation of, learning from others. Any other lessons that stick out to you when you think about, I know your dad, you've talked about your dad, but maybe it's business associates or even clients of yours, just other golden themes that you've learned that you've just caught on to and that you think about and use?
Man, that's put on the spot trying to think of, I'm for sure there would be many others. I think along that theme of, you're certainly self-deprecating, saying, hey, you're not the smartest one. It's the exact opposite. You are the smartest one because because you've recognized where to turn to. And I was just listening to Richard Branson on talking about, creating his, and he was the very first one that said, I recognized really early I was not the smartest guy in the room. My grades were horrible and I was flunking out of college. So what I recognized is I was going to be the hardest worker. Nobody was going to outwork me. And nobody was going to surround themselves with better, smarter people than I was. And that's why he was able to build, the empire that he built. And so I think that, the lesson that comes to mind, and it's because we're talking about this, is recognize your limit, your limits, and turn to those key people, those people to help you with your health, to help you with your finances, to help you with your, in your marriage. And it's not a sign of weakness to turn to those things and to get help. It's a sign of strength, right?
Yeah.
It's a sign of maturity.
I think there's a perception, though, because when you look at successful people, you may think that they just have it put together. They're an island unto themselves. And yet, it's interesting. The older I get and the more I'm surrounded by successful people, my own friends or network of people, what I recognize is that there's this unwritten kind of secret combination that goes on in the world. And it's wisdom that is shared by one human to the next. And in a world today where people get on chat, they want quick answers or whatever, they're thinking, well, I'm gonna get my next big idea, or I'm gonna figure out how to do success by searching it online. And in reality, wisdom is disseminated human to human.
Yeah.
Conversation by conversation. It's connecting with other people. And so I wanted to have this segment with you because I think that in practice, what you do is you have conversations with people about these things that they don't really make sense if you read them online. They make sense when you talk to people in person and have a conversation about them.
Yeah. I mean, you said something earlier off when we were just chatting on the phone, when you're like, look, everybody wants stuff now. They want quick transactions. They want things immediately. But there are some things that's just not possible. And so I love the theme, the idea of having conversations with the right people. Because if I ask people, hey, what does money mean to you? Some people have never really, they're like, well, it allows me to eat and roof over my head. And I said, so now that you have enough food and a roof over your head, why are you still working as hard as you are for money? What does it mean? And then having people be like, I've never really thought about that, right? I've never really, and then they turn around and they ask me, what does it mean to you, right? And I tell them it means time to me. It's time.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean stuff. It doesn't mean status. It means time. Money provides time for me because I'm way more about collecting experiences versus collecting stuff. Well, then it gets people thinking, what does it mean to me? Why do I get up every day? Why am I motivated to work? Well, that happens through a conversation. And it happens over, and it takes a little time to drill down and work through that. And that's the value of having those people in your life that you can have those conversations with.
I love that. That's so key. The challenge that, we are issuing, from Brainstoke, from what we're trying to do is to get people starting to think about unique human connection.
Yeah.
Like, not just because it mentally, is healthy, which it is, and the world is going so isolation right now, it's amazing. So people need connection that way. But I also want people to think, not just because they should for their health, but I want the young professionals, male or female, for you to think about your success is largely going to be dictated based on who you have conversations with. Not what you learned on chat, not what you read online. It is, who are you actually connecting with and what are you gleaning from them?
Yeah.
I now have 27 years of gleaning a ton from you. Like literally in spandex on the bike or in office or wherever we are, but you have become that person. So thank you for the conversation.
Well, no, it's always a pleasure, Tom. Yeah, thank you.